Sweden urged the return of the Chinese ship to Swedish waters to facilitate the investigation opened after undersea cables were damaged last week. Ukraine's President Zelensky said pressure on Russia must be increased, and Nordic Baltic leaders said they will expand their support.
Ursula von der Leyen's new commission has received the approval of the European Parliament. The German politician's team received 370 votes, with 282 against and 36 abstentions. Among those who supported her were the European People's Party, the Social Democrats and Renew Europe. MEPs from the Greens and the European Conservatives and Reformists were split, while radical right, far right and far left groups voted against her.
We will work with all democratic, pro-European forces in this House, and as I've done in my first mandate, I will always work from the centre.
During the evaluations, all candidates were individually screened before they passed the test. However, several of them, such as Vice President Teresa Rivera, who was opposed by the Spanish People's Party, or the Hungarian Oliver Varhely, who was questioned by several parties, found themselves in the hot seat.
You have scrutinised every member of this college in the last week. You have tested their fitness for the jobs they will serve. I know this was not easy. But overcoming divisions and forging compromises is the hallmark of a vivid democracy.
The new EU executive will begin its term in office on the 1st of December.
French Prime Minister Michel Barnier might lose his seat due to a controversial budget move. He argues that 40 billion euro in spending cuts and 20 billion euro in tax hikes are needed to reduce the country's debt spiral, which is over double the EU limit. However, lawmakers from other parties have refused to back his measures, meaning Barnier would need to use a constitutional clause to forcibly pass it until December 21st. This could lead to a no-confidence vote, which left-wing politicians have threatened, and members of the far-right National Rally also warned they would back the vote unless budget changes were made. Marine Le Pen disagrees with the tax increase, but wants cuts to medical aid for migrants and bureaucracy.
Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez introduced a third aid package of 2.2 billion euros for those affected by Storm Dana during his appearance in Congress on Wednesday. Sánchez announced 60 measures to speed up recovery and defended the government's handling of the weather disaster that killed over 220 people.
Por tanto, la pregunta, señorías, es si el Gobierno de España cumplió con estas responsabilidades. Y la respuesta es que sí lo hizo. Lo hizo desde el primer momento.
But opposition leader from the People's Party criticized the Prime Minister over a lack of accountability.
Acude a este debate casi un mes después. Y la verdad, señor Sánchez, usted ya no debería de estar aquí. Y cada día por una nueva razón. Llega tarde y encima lo hace para cubrirse de toda la peste de mentiras y corrupción que le rodea.
Sánchez added that his government is open to establishing a commission of inquiry. The third aid package brings the total state aid to 16.6 billion euros.
The autobiography of former German Chancellor Angela Merkel, Freedom, will be published in 31 countries. In Berlin, there was a huge crowd at the Dussmann Book House with hundreds of people coming to have the book signed. Many are curious and hope to find out more about Merkel's view on things within the 736 pages.
I do think she's responsible for everything that is happening today in Europe. Basically, she was the one who established this kind of connections with Russia, which made Germany dependent and the whole Europe dependent, and she is the one who basically blocked Ukraine from joining NATO in 2008, when it was still possible.
Merkel wrote her book together with her longtime political advisor, Beate Baumann. It is a look at her life and her path from pastor's daughter in the GDR to federal chancellor.
Ich fand sie als Person sehr wichtig für Europa, für die ganze Welt, nämlich weil sie keine Populistin war und für die Freiheit stand. Und heutzutage wollen die Leute wieder Autokraten wählen und wählen Autokraten. Und wir werden uns nochmal nostalgisch an Angela Merkel und die Freiheit zurückerinnern.
Merkel will go on a reading tour. The events in Stralsund and Cologne were sold out within a very short time.
Das Interesse an Angela Merkels Memoiren ist nicht nur in Deutschland groß. Am 2. Dezember wird die Altkanzlerin ihr Buch mit dem ehemaligen US-Präsidenten Barack Obama in Washington vorstellen. Diana Resnick aus Berlin für Euronews.
Wayne Holsworth became an advocate for banning Australian children younger than 16 from social media. That is because last year his 17-year-old son Mac committed suicide after falling victim to an online sextortion scam. A 47-year-old man from Sydney, posing as an 18-year-old girl, demanded money for an intimate image that the boy had shared. Since then, the grieving father has taken his tragic story to schools in the country and warned students of the risks of social media.
I presented to now over 10,000 people, of which 3,000 are secondary school children. I asked them to put their hand up if they would support it. Yes, they support it. They're the kids that are supporting it. We can't rely on the tech giants to help. It's not in their interests. So we have to take control.
But not all parents, lawmakers or experts are convinced that banning young children from social media is the answer.
I understand both the limits of that particular policy and the expert evidence that is coming out from people who work in this space about the problems for young people being excluded from those spaces. I also think there's very significant privacy concerns for all Australians who may, in fact, be required to give up some of their privacy in pursuit of this particular policy.
Platforms such as X and Instagram announced that they find the ban problematic. Australia's House of Representatives on Wednesday voted overwhelmingly in favor of the ban, and the Senate is expected to make it law soon. Once it enters into force, even parental consent will not be able to override the ban.
Several media reported that Sweden urged the return of the Chinese cargo ship to Swedish waters in order to facilitate the investigation that was opened after undersea cables were damaged in the Baltic Sea. The Chinese vessel, which is currently in international waters between Sweden and Denmark, became a key suspect after it was reported in the area at the time the cables were severed. Sweden, Finland, and Germany launched investigations last week into the incident and raised questions about potential sabotage.
Det der med, at man påstår, at det er et hændeligt uheld måske, så har man ikke to hændelige uheld inden for det samme døgn. Altså.
Det så begynder lige pludselig at ligge stille, og i det her tilfælde oven på 3 kabler. Det er ikke en normal adfærd for et handelsskib.
Sweden's Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson said that he is not making any accusations, but wants to seek clarity on what has happened.
An elderly woman and her husband were rescued along with their 2 lambs and a chicken after they got lost in a snowstorm in southern Turkey. Naci and Mustafa Akın were trying to head back to their home in Akseki, a remote town in the Taurus Mountains, when they got lost. According to Turkish media, the 70-year-old couple were caught in a snowstorm and took refuge under a tree, where they were rescued by Turkey's Disaster and Emergency Management Agency hours later. Both of them were taken to a local hospital and now reported to be in good condition.
Following his meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said pressure on Russia must be maintained and increased at various levels.
Обговорили контакти з нашими партнерами, з Америкою та іншими, нашу скоординовану роботу з ними заради виконання того, про що ми вже домовлялись, і заради потрібного додаткового посилення і військового, і політичного.
At a 2-day security summit in Sweden, leaders of Nordic and Baltic states, as well as Poland, agreed to increase their support for Ukraine. Among other things, they said they would work to provide more ammunition.
We will enhance our efforts, including to defense industrial production in Ukraine, and invest to increase Ukraine's ammunition supplies. We strengthen Ukraine's energy infrastructure to help them through the winter, and we support them on their path to EU and to NATO.
Leaders also discussed transatlantic relations and regional security in the Baltic Sea region. Long lines formed outside of a bakery in Deir el-Balah. People are desperate to buy a bag of bread. The World Food Programme warned that bakeries in central Gaza are shutting down as a result of severe shortages and limited aid reaching the areas.
The World Food Programme says that all bakeries in central Gaza have shut down due to severe supply shortages. Bread is a lifeline for many families in Gaza. It's often the only food they can access. Now, even that is slipping out of reach.
Earlier this week, Israel and Hezbollah agreed to a ceasefire deal. Many had hoped the agreement would have induced a truce in Gaza as well, where the war has stretched on for almost 14 months. But in northern Gaza, hundreds of Palestinians continue to flee as Israel's latest offensive in the region rages on. Almost no humanitarian aid is able to reach the area, and food security experts previously warned that famine is imminent.
Euronews. The news